The third movie in the Quiet Place franchise is now in cinemas. It's called A Quiet Place Day One. This time it is a prequel. And as the title suggests, it takes place on the day in which the aliens come to Earth. This one stars Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn. And I think it tells a very different story from the previous two movies. Now, if you think this is going to be some sort of origin story as how the world came to an end, yes, it is, but all of that stuff kind of takes place in the background of the story of Lupita Nyong'o's Sam. And I think that's what makes this movie so good. Like, I really enjoyed this. I think I preferred it to A Quiet Place Part 2 because it was a lot more intimate, it was a lot more personal. It just so happened to tell an interesting story about two people who happen to be in the middle of an apocalypse. And that's what makes this movie so strong.
I liked how Joseph Quinn sort of only pops in maybe about almost at the second act, I think.
Yeah, I would say halfway through the movie.
Halfway through the film, right? Yeah. So there isn't all this unnecessary long baggage about relationship and them trying to learn each other's names and trying to get each other's feelings and all that. Like, this is a very quick sort of two people who, in a really unfortunate and extraordinary circumstance, sort of get thrust together and have to find a way to survive.
You say none of that feelings crap, but I think this movie was a lot more emotional than even the previous two films.
It doesn't even bother to pretend to ignore the, oh, will they, won't they, are they falling in love with each other. The emotional beats of this movie is purely story driven, and purely because of what the situation they're in. They're really falling in love as friends almost, and they're really sort of holding each other up almost at times quite literally. I agree with you. I think this was a much better film than the second one. The second one had the same problem I had with Inside Out 2, in that the first one was so good in that it introduces a new thing. But then in the second outing, the movies almost don't do a new thing with that new thing, right? Like in the first Quiet Place, you are learning about these monsters. The people in the movie already know how to deal with it. We don't, the audience. However, in the second one, as the family have to leave the farm, it still feels pretty much just an extension of that first movie. The same with Inside Out 2. Like, I loved Inside Out 2, but it's still a emotions getting into an adventure in Riley's head kind of movie. Still fantastic, still very good, just not as mind-blowing as the first ones were. A Quiet Place Day 1 does almost a different thing. Like in the second Quiet Place, they tried to open up the world, which I'm always normally a big fan of, but it felt like they never quite settled in onto what they were going to do about it. Whereas here in A Quiet Place Day One, they really focused in on Lupita Nyong'o's experience, or rather experiencing this thing that we already know about.
Yes.
And I thought that that was really a really good way to tell the story.
And in so doing, they actually open up the world in quite a big way.
Yes.
All of it takes place in New York City. And what's interesting about it is Michael Sarnowski, who is the director of this, makes some very, very smart decisions. He also wrote the screenplay. Apparently, John Krasinski hired him after seeing him do Pig, which is that Nicolas Cage movie.
Oh, okay.
And he makes some very cool choices. When the movie opens and the aliens crash, you see these comets falling from the sky. There is a blackout scene, and then when Lupita Nyong'o wakes up, you already understand that you have to be quiet. Because we, the audience, have already seen the previous two movies. You don't have to go through the process of watching the characters on screen discover that these aliens are attracted to noise. And so that's a waste of time. And I think he makes a very, very smart shortcut in blacking her out and then waking her up to a world where all of the people there already know they have to be in hiding and have to be quiet, because you can move that plot along.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is very cool. It is very smart. It is a very good shorthand and it gets the story moving. The other very smart decision is making Lupita Nyong'o have terminal cancer. Like
Mm,
when the movie opens, she is in a hospice. I mean, by being in a hospice, you know she's at the end of the road. She is going to die. And I think that's very interesting in a movie where aliens kill everything on sight or on sound.
yeah.
And it makes for a cool dynamic because here is a character who literally has nothing left to live for because she doesn't have any time at all. And yet she is fighting for her survival, not against the cancer, but against these external forces. And what does she want? And what is her journey? And where does it take her? Like, you're still invested in her wanting to go to Harlem. You have no idea why, and you have no idea what her motivations are until, of course, the end of the movie, but you're very invested in that story, and I think that's very cool.
I mean, and I feel like this was kind of the thing with both the quiet places, both quiet places. What I really liked about it was that this was just about normal people trying to survive. This isn't an Independence Day where we will take it to the monsters, we will kill them. This isn't Will Smith's zombie movie. This isn't the Brad Pitt zombie movie. This is just like we have to stay alive. I really like that they've kept that going, that this prequel isn't from the point of view, it doesn't even have a point of view of the generals trying to figure this out. What are the scientists saying? No, this is just about Lupita Nyong'o's character trying to get through the days as they come. That was also another thing that I really liked about this. I tried to count, I think it was about 4 days, this movie. Am I right?
Yes, if you look at the number of days and nights, it feels like about 4 days.
I think the fourth day is where the movie ends. I love that. I love that this movie is set in a very tight window of time. This isn't we catch up with them later when they know what they're doing. No. Like you said, the only time anybody has a time jump is when Lupita Nyong'o's character passes out at the beginning of the attack. We now know the rules, or rather, she now knows the rules. We knew it all along. We already knew what the monsters looked like. They didn't need to do
surprise reveal. Yeah.
and it just went along. Like, it's a really tight movie. I can't remember what the runtime was, but 99 minutes. Yeah. And none of it is wasted. None of it is wasted. It was all good story beats. It was all good emotional time spent.
I did not feel this movie at all. At one point, I looked at my watch and I was like, wow, a lot of time has passed. This movie really moves. And it moves despite not having plenty of action sequences, for example. There are some pretty tense moments, yes, but a lot of it is all character. There's very little dialogue. It leans into the whole silence thing, into the music. And because of that, just like the previous two movies, the sound design is absolutely stunning. You need to watch this on a big screen in a very loud cinema because then there's a huge contrast between the silences in the movie and even a drop of rain, for example. Like you can feel and you can hear every one of those moments.
Also, just the use of silence is beautiful here, right? There were moments when Lupita Nyong'o's character is just walking through a dead, silent New York, and it was chilling, right? Because you knew what that silence meant. You knew that that silence meant death. You knew that any noise meant also death, and that really sort of amped you along as an audience.
But also the way that each set piece was introduced. This is a New York that has just been attacked. And of course, there are evacuation orders. So there is this whole sequence where people are following the evacuation orders and they are walking in silence. And you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Everyone's following the rules. But at the back of your mind, you're like, there is no way a large group of human beings can walk in perfect silence. And then something happens. And suddenly you have like just mass hysteria kick in.
Even just before that mass hysteria kicking in, what I feel like that sequence really showed is that sometimes it's not even about the idiot being an idiot. It's about the guy in the wheelchair.
Yes.
It's about the old lady dragging along. Yes, it looks like a suitcase, but probably full of medicine, whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's not that someone's being an idiot, blasting out music, trying to get everybody's emotional hopes up, right? It's not that. It's just by situation. Some people just will have trouble here. And I
Yeah.
think that was important. There are no real villains here. Like, sure, there are monsters killing people, but they're not portrayed as villains. They're not like the alien in Aliens. You know what I mean? They're not hunting you down. They're just wild animals in the wild that happens to be New York City that the humans are going to have to try and deal with.
The movie looks great. It cost about $67 million, but the visual effects look fantastic. The tension is great. New York City, post-apocalyptic New York City looks absolutely fantastic. Apparently, Sarnowski cites Children of Men as an inspiration for the way the world looks. And he really drills down onto that. There are just broken shards of buildings and people. It's one of these weird things because it isn't quite The Last of Us, because obviously not as much time has passed. It looks very much like our post-pandemic world. If there were fires, it's the silence that is killer as opposed to the broken buildings.
That's what makes this movie a bit different from all the other post-apocalyptic movies, right? Like, post-apocalyptic means time has passed. The Last of Us, the forests have regrown.
Yes.
And that,
Like there's ivy all over the buildings.
yeah, like that airplane that crashed full of people is now covered in, nests of birds and shit, right? Here, it literally just happened. And I think you're right. The stillness is what is the most
Disturbing. It's frightening.
it's eerie, right? Like, you know that 24 hours prior there was a traffic jam down that road that Lupita Nyong'o was walking down. I want to go back to you talking about the set pieces. I love that the set pieces were not stupid people being stupid.
No.
It's not someone accidentally turning on a jukebox, right? It's like, in trying to open this door, this thing fell and made noise and I didn't know about it. It's all purely accidental. It never leaves you, the audience, screaming, "Oh, you stupid idiot."
Because everyone, as they should, is being careful.
And they know the rules.
Yes.
Nobody's flouting it for flouting its sake.
Which brings me to the cat. Because I think that was very well handled as well. There is a cat who is the third character in this movie. And after looking at the posters and watching the trailer and some of the featurettes, I was like, oh no, is this going to be one of those things where Lupita Nyong'o really loves the cat and the cat gets her into unnecessary trouble? Blah, de blah. We've seen this in so many movies. No, that is not the case. Even the way they handle the cat is not idiotic. Like, you don't have a character who is obsessed with her cat and ends up getting herself into trouble.
Yes.
The cat actually behaves exactly like how a cat would behave. It fucks off whenever there's trouble, and then it just comes back whenever it feels like it.
Lupita Nyong'o's character acts the way a person who's grown up with cats act. Right?
Yes.
She's constantly just shitting on the cat, right? Like, don't feed him too much, he's fat.
She hasn't got a sense of panic whenever he disappears.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because any cat owner who's had cats know that the cat will come back if it wants to. If it doesn't want to, it's fine. Peace be upon you, move along, right? I think that's kind of my reaction to cats as well. My cats, right? They're not my children. Right? And I think I love the way they treated that animal in this film. They're not precious about it. They don't have to constantly save the cat.
This is a very good film for those reasons. Like, yes, it is a franchise movie, but it also feels very much like a refreshing installment into the franchise. Because once again, they've decided to do something completely different. It isn't taking the easy way out of over-explaining a situation that you saw in the first two movies. This is not that film. This is a character-driven movie with three characters, Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, and the cat. And they drive the story. Jimon Honsu is in this, but it is a cameo. And I love the fact that they don't over-explain who he is. Sure, he's got a name this time. It's Henri. I don't believe he was named in the second movie. But that, I think, is the only extra piece of information you get. It's not like they're giving him an excessive amount of backstory to kind of justify his actions in the second movie, because The second movie did that already. You don't have to add any more exposition. And all of the decisions in this movie are so restrained and well executed. And I honestly wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did.
I think a big part of it as well is that Michael Sarnowski really respected the audience. It didn't look down on the audience. He didn't see fit to repeat the rules of the world constantly as this movie went along. Even though this is the first day it happens. I've seen the first two movies. I know what the rules are. I don't need to see these characters learn and relearn those rules over and over again.
If you are a fan of the franchise, this movie will not disappoint you. It is well worth your time and money. Watch it in IMAX if you can. Oh, the size of the screen, the sound. This is a movie about sound. It is also, along with A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2, the only time you will see or hear that much silence in a Malaysian cinema. It is great. I've seen both of those movies also with a regular Malaysian audience and not just at a press screening. And I was amazed at how people were even careful in chewing their popcorn. So everyone is involved in it and you want to be a part of that experience. And I think this movie really, really delivers. So check out A Quiet Place Day One. It's now showing in Malaysian cinemas. Let us know what you think once you've seen it. You know how to reach out. Goggler MY, all of our social media feeds. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.